Hey guys, this is Stephanie and I am Stacks on Stacks on Stacks. That one was for you, Han. I am coming to you guys with my January wrap up, and I actually read 13 books in the month of January, which is pretty good. I wasn't in a super duper I want to read mood. Quite a few of them were actually graphic novels as well, which is great because I had a goal to read more graphic novels this year, so I feel like I'm doing well there. But let's get into what I read. Now, the first thing that I read in the month of January was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Now, I don't have the book here because I loaned it to my brother-in-law, and I really liked this book. I feel like people have been saying, you need to read this for months, and maybe a year. And finally, I read it and I was like, this was so great. Now, it did take my husband reading it for me to get to read it. He read it and he's like, you're reading this next. This was great. And I'm like, okay. And he was right. It was great. I really, really did enjoy it. I ended up giving this one a 5 out of 5 stars for my personal read and a 5 out of 5 for the technical read. I thought it was really, really well written. There were some slow bits. I will admit there were times where I'm like, can we get on with the story? I see where we are. We're doing this thing. Can we just do it faster? But somehow I still really enjoyed it despite that. And it was very reminiscent of Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, which I read, holy stars, probably like 15 years ago. Oh no, probably like 17 years ago. You guys, I'm so old. And that was one of my husband's favorite books back then. So I read that and I loved it. And this one kind of reminded me of that a little bit. And I really did enjoy the book. I went into this book not knowing much about it, so I'm not going to tell you guys much about it either. Basically, we have a character's name is Darrow, and he lives on Mars. And he's kind of like bottom of the food chain worker. Those are reds, and he's a red, and he's like bottom of the food chain worker. The top is like golds, and then they have like silvers, pinks, browns, everything like that on the in-between. It's kind of like a caste system, so certain people that are colors are worth more and things like that. So that's kind of the setting that it's in, and that's all I'm really going to tell you because the journey and getting there was just the best part of the book. I immediately wanted to go into the second one, but I got distracted by other books, so I'm hoping I'll be actually getting into Golden Sun this next month. Not only is it one of the books my husband picked for me to read, but I really want to get into it, so I'm trying to I want to read that one, and then I want to read Morningstar right after it because I was told that's what I'm going to want to do. So I'm trying to hold off actually on Golden Sun until I have Morningstar, and then I'll just, All in all, it was a great way to start out my year. Next, I read Paper Girls, Volume 1, 2, and 3 by Brian K. Vaughan, and I got them from my library, so I don't actually have them here, and I can't remember for the life of me who told me to read them, but thank you. They were fantastic. I really enjoyed them. They have like a 80s vibe, but then they have like a little time travel thing, and some of it's a little sci-fi weird, but it was really good. Really enjoyable. I feel like sometimes graphic novels can go a little bit weird for me, and maybe I just haven't read enough, but these didn't enter the weird zone. They just were entered the just right zone, that I would believe this, I can understand this zone, things like that. I liked them. I think I gave all of them a 4-star personally and a 4.5 star technically. I thought the pictures were great. I thought the plot line was great. I don't think I appreciated it as much as it was good, if that makes sense. I feel like it was better than I had appreciation for. But I really did like them, and I'm looking forward to the 4th one. It comes out like April, I think, and I've already put the request into my library to get that one too so that I can read it. The next book I also got from my library was Dazzling Heights, and this is by Catherine McGee. This is the sequel to The 1000th Floor, which I read last January, and I read this one this January. The 3rd book in the series comes out, I think, end of the summer. I'm not certain if it's just 3 books, though. It could be more. Basically, it's kind of a futuristic dystopian society, but it's like the rich side of dystopian. Like, I'm dealing with it's dystopian, but this is like the Gossip Girl section of dystopians. So the more money you have, the higher floor you live on, and we follow the girl who lives on the 1000th floor. So the first book opens up with a death. Somebody was thrown or fell or jumped, you don't know, off the 1000th floor, and boom, splat. After 1,000 floors, you do die. So I'm not going to go into too much detail what the second book was about. I liked the first book. I ended up giving this about a 4.0 personally, and maybe a 3.8 technically. I actually thought this book was pretty good. It didn't really suffer from second book syndrome, which is good. I feel like lots of second books do. Like, it could have just been 2 books, and instead you put a 3rd book in there. We could have just cut that in half and gone But no, this one was actually pretty good. It brought in the characters from the old book, brought in some new characters, it brought in the old conflict, and it brought in some new conflict. And I think that's a good way to do a second book. Make it matter. Make it have a point, not just, a placeholder for a middle book in a series. So I did enjoy that. It is pretty quick moving as well. It is a little YA-ish as far as like the writing and the drama goes, but at the same time, it's good YA. It really did leave me excited to read the third book in August. And the next book I read is Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is the third book in the Mistborn series, and I can't talk about it as much as I want to talk about it because it's the third book in the series, and I would spoil everything in the first two. But I just want to tell the end of everything to everyone because I just really loved this book. If you like with this book series, I liked Mistborn, I liked Will of Ascension, and I liked Hero of Ages even more. I just kept liking each book more than the last. And there's something about Brandon Sanderson's writing when he does that. Like, his books never suffer from middle book syndrome because it's like you have your characters and they're so well developed. I think that's why I liked the second book, because we just hit the ground running. There was no warm up. There was no, oh yes, and my character's this, and I do this for a living. It was just like, boom, you better read the first book or you're a fool. I like that. I think it's great. And honestly, his writing is so smooth and fluid. It is like, it's like a really smooth custard, if you know what I mean. Like, just so smooth and so silky, and you're like, how can something be this wonderful? And it is. His writing just flows. Like, even when there's spots that are like a little slower, and I mean a little, or places where it's like, info dumping, like, okay, so you need to know this. It never feels like info dumping. It always feels like I am learning more about these characters and I want to know what's going on, and you want to know every bit of information too. It's just, I don't know. It's just wonderful. Like, I loved this series. I loved this book. I am going to continue with the Alloy of Law probably next month. That's one of the reasons I didn't let my husband pick a bunch of Sanderson books, because I have a plan. I'm going to get through them. I have a plan. I just got to do it in my own time. That's all. But I gave this 5 personal, 5 technical, and I thought it was a great wrap up to a trilogy without being like, okay, everybody gets a happy little ending and a happy little this and a happy little that, with having enough realism in it and enough like ending in it. I don't know. I loved it. I really did. I loved this book. It's possibly one of my new favorite books, which is crazy. I never thought a part like fantasy sci-fi book would be my favorite, but guys, it just might be. It was so good. I want to start the next series, but at the same time I want to go back and start over, but I don't have time to reread 3 books this big, so I'll just have to wait a little bit. Now, the next book I read is Zookeepers Wife, and this is by Diane Ackerman. Now, personally, I gave this book 3 stars, and technically I gave it a 3.1. Now, I thought I was being pretty generous with this 3 stars too, and I think I mostly gave it a 3-star because it was a good story, but I don't think it was well told. Now, again, I read this book coming off of Hero of Ages, so I might have been having my expectations a tad too high. However, I do like historical fiction, and I do like World War II historical fiction, and it was a bit of a letdown. My biggest problem with this book was actually that the way it jumped around. So we have our story, and instead of continuing on our storyline the whole time, they kind of like, so this and this and this, a kangaroo. And the first kangaroo was actually brought over in 1815, and it was bred with a kangaroo from Germany. Now, those kangaroos gave the Warsaw Zoo their kangaroos. And then these kangaroos had 15 kangaroos. Now, we named them Sammy and Jammy and Mammy, and I was just like, oh my goodness. Tell me the story. I don't care about the stupid kangaroos. And it just kept rabbit trailing with wonderful bits of information if this were a documentary or a non-fictional story. Now, I know this is based on nonfiction, but it's based on nonfiction. It is not a nonfiction story. So I felt like it just kind of took all these rabbit trails, and I lost all my momentum in the story to the point where the last quarter of the book, I was like, I just want to finish this book, because I stopped enjoying it, because every page we were talking about who invented pogo sticks or why this animal acts that way, versus focusing on the zookeeper's wife. Because that's why I was reading the book. I didn't read the book to hear about kangaroos and elephants. I read the book to hear about the zookeeper's wife. Basically, this is a book that takes place in Warsaw about 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. And it talks about all the horrible things that went on there, and this family that owns a zoo, and the things specifically that they go through, and it focuses more on the zookeeper's wife versus the zookeeper. It is a good and heartfelt story. Like, if I take out all the side bits and I just focus on the story, it was good. It wasn't 5-star good, but it was good. I did enjoy it. I did watch the movie. I could do a movie to book adaptation. If you guys want me to do that, tell me below and I'll do one of those videos for you guys on this. But I found this book disappointing. The pacing just killed it for me. The fact that I couldn't just read and enjoy the story, but I had to have a million small interruptions. It was literally like reading with your like 3-year-old in the room. You're not going to get much read. And I don't even have a 3-year-old, and I envision this is what it's like. You're not going to get much read. That 3-year-old's going to come over and they're going to need water. They need to go potty. They want your attention. Can you change the channel? Can you get them crackers? Can they sit on your lap? Can they sit on your foot? Can they lean on you? They need a blanket. They're cold. They're hot. I mean, this is life, but that's what reading the book was like. It was like having a 2-year-old, but in the book, and I couldn't get away. Ah! This is probably why I don't have kids, you guys. All in all, the book was a bit of a letdown, which is too bad because I've heard wonderful things about this, and I read it on a recommendation from Maureen Keevy. And next, I kind of went on a bit of an Agatha Christie binge, and I read 3 Agatha Christie books. And they were great. First one I read was Cricket House. I gave this a 4.2 personally and a 4.0 technically. I really did enjoy this book. I actually originally read it because there's a movie of it, and I don't remember who all's in it. The girl from X-Files. That's the only one I remember. Anyway, they made a movie. It didn't even hit our theaters. I think it went like straight to DVD, which I'm like, that's fine. I'll wait for it to hit Redbox. And then I'll watch it. I enjoyed this book. It's another classic Christie, a whodunit. Now, I will say I kind of guessed who did it, maybe a third of the way into the book, but it was a guess. Because you're always guessing with these things. You're like, oh, it was the butler. Oh, it was the maid. Oh, it was Miss Scarlet. Oh, it was Colonel Mustard. And though I did suspect that person, I was still second guessing myself the whole book, and that's what makes her books so great. I really did enjoy this. The premise in this one is that the patriarch of this family is killed in his house. So the suspects are all his family members, and they have to figure out, you know, who done it. It's great. Most Agatha Christie's are a pretty quick read. I loved this one. I enjoyed the journey. It's not a series. If it was, I'd read more. Next one I got was Endless Night by Agatha Christie as well. This one I got from my library, hence the shininess of it. And I loved this one. I actually gave this a 5.0 personally and a 4.0 technically. It's another Agatha Christie whodunit, and it actually was a little different from some of the other Agatha Christies. This one was written a little bit later in her life, and it was definitely like a slower paced one. Like a lot of hers, I feel like they're like, somebody's dead! Who did it? Hana, hana, hana! But this one was more like, hey, this is just a story of me. I'm just a normal guy, and I went to this place, I met this girl, and I'm not the best guy in the world. I'm kind of lazy, but I met her and she was beautiful, and then I fell in love with her, and she was okay with me being me, and it was a very different approach than most Agatha Christie's. And so I think while I was in the journey, I'm like, where is this going? Nobody's dead yet, and we're halfway through this book. But I realized that she was building the story in a different way than she normally does, and though I would say halfway through the book, I probably would give it like a 3.8. Like, it's good, but, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I would say that after that halfway point, I was like, wait a second. I see where this is going. Somebody's going to die. And I enjoyed it. I really shouldn't enjoy people dying this much. Good thing it's fiction, right? I loved this one. I loved the adventure. I loved the way I was pulled along and invested in it like I was one of the characters myself. And it was a really good one. It was definitely one of the best Agatha Christie's I'd read. I'm going to have to buy it because this library copy, A, is ugly, and B, it mine. So I got to buy one. And the third Agatha Christie I read was N or M, and this is the third novel in the Tommy and Tuppence series. I give this one a 4.0 personally and a 3.8 technically. It was probably my least favorite of the 3 Tommy Tuppence I have read, but I still really enjoyed it. I think what made it my least favorite is Tommy and Tuppence weren't together as much in this one. They were kind of separate for a reason. And so I was kind of seeing his point of view and her point of view and I like it when they're together. They're just magic when they're together. So I prefer that. I can't talk much about it. It's the third book in the series and I don't want to spoil things for you, but I enjoyed this. I enjoyed these two together, and I will probably read number 4 and number 5, which there's 5 in that series, at some point this year because I just read these and enjoy them. They're just great. Next, I read Miss Marvel, super famous, and this is the 5th book in the series, and Yeah, it was pretty good. I give it a 3.1 personally, and about a 3.0 technically. I do feel like sometimes we're rehashing the same stuff over and over when it comes to these, but I always love the humor, and honestly, I love the drawings as well. And the last thing I read this month was yet one more graphic novel, and that is Star Wars Adventures Destroyer Down. Now, this actually follows Ren, and she's still on Jakku, so this is before the Star Wars that we know takes place, and she's supposed to be going to find a specific thing, and we get to follow her on that adventure, and then it kind of flashes back and then back to her and then back and then back to her. So it wasn't my favorite. I'd give it about a 2.5. I did feel like the writing was a little bit lazy and the plot was a little bit lazy. Maybe a 2.0 technically, because I felt like a lot of it was like, let's get a book out, you guys. So, you know, it wasn't great, but I read a lot of great things this month, so I'm okay with that. Now, before we wrap up, I have the mug, which I don't think I did this in front of the camera last month for my wrap up, but my December wrap up, I had to read a book with lots of action in it, and I did do that with Well of Ascension, so that one's done. Ooh, I totally almost threw that in my candle. That would have been bad. And then my January one was read a book that was recommended from BookTube, and I got recommended Paper Girls, Red Rising, Hero of Ages, and Zookeepers Wife, all from BookTube, so I am safe as houses on that one. So for the month of February, ooh, I'm going to dig one from the bottom. We're going to get a good one. I need to read a book that was published in the last 2 years. Well, I can do that. So I don't know which one I'm going to do. I am probably going to see if Golden Sun was done in the last 2 years, because I definitely want to read that one this month. I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. And just to remind you guys, this is actually from, there's water in here? Why are these wet? What the what? This is something that Drinking by My Shelf started doing called Get a Hold of Your Shelf Challenge. So I just have a bunch of little pieces of paper that talk about like specific kinds of books, like read a book published in the last 2 years. And then I pick one of those off my TBR shelf, and then I make sure to read that one book this month. So it's just kind of a thing to get me to keep reading the books I already own and whatnot, and keep reading things off my TBR shelf. And that is it. I would say all in all, I had a pretty good reading month, maybe because I might have a new favorite book, who knows. But please feel free to comment down below with the best read that you read in the month of January. Also tell me if you've read any of the books that I just read, and I want to know what you think of them too. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to tell all your friends. It's funny because I tell my friends and they still don't subscribe. What the what? I post videos on Tuesdays, I post videos on Fridays, so you know you can find me here then. I look forward to talking to you then. Bye!